Hey, just wanted to talk to you for a couple of minutes about the class. Just a few little tidbits of information and then actually a little bit more detailed information about the contents of Chapter 8. So the first thing that I wanted to mention to you is that Chapter 6 and 7, they're both due Monday night at midnight. And you'll see I did lump those together. They're shorter chapters. You don't have a lot of assignments in those. So that should be doable for you. Also, for the security assignment, I had a question about that. The link in that assignment, somebody had some difficulty with, so I went in and added the Word document there for you, so that might help some of you out. But if you have any questions, let me know about that. For the most part, everybody's pretty much up to date on their assignments, so that's good. The reason that I lumped two chapters together is so that when you have a week like this, such as next week for Chapter 8, you notice you have quite a few assignments for that. So I would suggest that you not wait till the last minute if you have a tendency to do so, because you will have quite a few assignments here and it's not anything you'll be able to do like super quick. So I would suggest that you start ahead of time, follow the directions exactly, or that's going to throw you off a little bit. Also, a side note here is that I do have several people that submitted assignments when I was going in and grading assignments, and I put some notes in there. A few of you submitted the packet tracer file, which is fine to always submit the packet tracer file if you're in doubt. But if there are questions that are asked, or it's asking you what you saw when you were doing your packet tracer assignment, you'll need to submit the Word document for that. And I went in and put in notes and then didn't put a grade there. But I noticed some of you still have not gone back and adjusted that. So I did put zeros in those spots. I can change those if you submit the correct file. But please do so within the next week so that I can change your grade. Other than that, the zero will stay there. Even though the packet tracer file is there, I can't tell that anything has been done to it because it's not one of the packet tracers that accumulates points as you complete an item. So it's just hard to tell what you've done. Okay, it looks just like the start file. So if you have any questions on that, just send me an email or send me something on the Remind app. The Remind app is probably the quickest way. And you can always send me a Remind text if you want to check up on something. I know sometimes I'll have a tendency to maybe overlook an email or look at it when I'm in the classroom or when I'm doing something else and need to get back to it. So if I don't answer you right away, just send me a Remind text and jog my memory, because I don't intend to do that. So the next thing I wanted to mention was your Chapter 8. Now you're going to be switching gears a little bit. So you're going to be going from more theory type stuff into actually configuring your Cisco devices. The good thing about that is that a lot of people really like this part of it because it's hands-on and it kind of just makes sense. So I wanted just to take a couple of minutes and talk to you about the contents that are within this chapter. Again, this configuring Cisco devices. So you're going to be looking at the Cisco switches and the Cisco routers. You're going to be looking at the operating system and how to use the command line mode for this. Now, in general, when you're configuring the Cisco devices, we won't be using a graphical user interface or a GUI interface like you're going to use in your Windows. Okay, you're used to using Windows and clicking on different icons. You'll use graphical user, which means you're going to have to learn how to type in commands. So that may be an adjustment for some of you, and that's okay, but you'll be walked through each of these devices. Now, if you'll remember back from your chapter where you kind of learned about your OSI model, your switch is used within a network. Basically, it's kind of a connection point for all the devices in your network. Whereas a router is going to be used to route information. So a router is going to use IP addresses. IP addresses will be used to route something from source to destination. You have to have a source and destination IP address. to route data throughout a network. Okay, and that will never change. Whereas a MAC address stays within a network, switches stay within a network. Routers move everything from one network to another. So that's the gist of the difference between a router and a switch. An example of your operating system in the command line mode is shown right here. Now, they show using TerraTerm. If you were in my classroom, we'd be using PuTTY. HyperTerminal can always be used as well. Okay, and this is an example of what it looks like. Got things popping up on my screen here. Okay, so you see you're actually entering commands in order to use this. Now, there are different ways to connect to a Cisco device. One of those is establishing a console connection. So this is the one, if you were in the classroom looking at a device, or if you get into Net 125, you will actually physically cable a device. You'll plug an Ethernet cord into, or a console cable into the console port. If you're using Packet Tracer, you will connect a console cable here. Okay. Now, so consoling to a port is one way to configure a device, but you have to be physically connected to it if you're going to plug in a cable. The other two ways would be Telnet. Okay. Telnet, you can remotely log in, but the catch with that is that it has to be configured via console first. So once you can do the initial configuration, then you can Telnet, but you can't just Telnet if it's not been configured to do so. Okay. Once you do, you'll see your different modes here. Now, this mode right here is the first mode that you would see. It's called the user exec mode. And if your device doesn't have a configuration on it, this is what it would be set to. And then once you type enable, then you'll get to this mode, the privilege mode. That's the one where you're going to be using a lot of show commands. So I would definitely watch the video here on navigating between your different modes. You'll be entering commands, and this is the format of your commands. So usually you'll have your prompt, you'll have the command, a space, and then whatever you're trying to do. So this is show IP protocols, or ping 192.168.10.5. Okay. That's the basic format of that. There are lots of key words here and help features. Although you don't have a help menu like you do in Word, if you're used to that, you could use the question mark. Okay? And that is very useful. And you can use that real world example. You can use that. Okay? On certification exams, you can usually use the question mark as well. So pay attention to that as you're doing that. Show commands are really important. So make sure you get comfortable with your show commands. Show commands give you information about the device. So if you want to see what's going on with the interface, the command is show interfaces, or show interface fast Ethernet 01 if you want to look at fast Ethernet 01. Okay, there are a lot of different show commands. So just like I said, get comfortable about those, or with those. Okay. And basic configuration. Okay, get comfortable with that. Why do you need an IP address on a switch? If you'll remember from your OSI model, a switch is a layer 2 device if you're looking at a basic switch, and then routers are layer 3 devices. Layer 3 devices use IP addresses. Okay, and that's what we typically think of. So you're like, why am I putting an IP address on a switch? The reason you put an IP address on a switch is so that you can access it within the network, so that you can actually find it, because you have to have an IP address to be able to access anything on the network. So you're not actually passing packets through the switch like you do the same way with a router, or a router determines that. You're actually just accessing it. Okay. But make sure you follow through all this info in the chapter. This is really important information. You're going to configure a router, you're going to set up passwords, okay, you're going to set up that telnet, you're going to set up the SSH. And then right here towards the end, this will be one of the last things I wanted to tell you about, is look at the structure here. So you have R1, you have a couple of switches, and you have PCs. So remember I said that your switches stay within a network? Okay, so everything from this interface on the router all the way down to PC1 and 2, including the switch, are on the same network. From the G01 interface around to 3 and 4 and that switch are all on a different network. Okay. Now, if you're going from PC1 to PC2, you can just pass right through the switch. You don't really need to go to this router. Okay. So you don't have to use a default gateway. Okay. A default gateway is used if you need to leave your network. So if PC1 wanted to communicate with PC4, then you would need a default gateway. Okay, and your default gateway is always the router interface that that device is connected to. So it would be the G00 here for PC1 and PC2. The default gateway for these devices down here would be the G01 interface. Okay. So again, if 4 wanted to communicate with 1 or 2, it would need to pass through the default gateway. Your default gateway is your way like into another network or into or out of your network. Okay. Think of that as like a gated community. If you went to a gated community and you wanted to leave the gated community, you might have to go through this one gate. Okay, and that would be your way to get pretty much anywhere else. So that's the way a default gateway works here. If PC1 wants to leave its network, wants to leave this link here, it has to go to the gateway before it can get anywhere else. Okay, and that's the way your default gateway works. So that address would be configured on that router. These devices would configure their IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. Okay. So I hope that helps a little bit with some of the information here. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be glad to answer those. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy configuring your different devices in Chapter 8, and have a great weekend.